So we just got the latest CPI data from the Stats Canada this month, and according to that, the inflation, the yearly CPI reading has come down from 5.2% to 4.3%. That is a big decline from the last month, and one of the reasons is we saw a significant decline in the transportation cost. But what we're seeing here is the food inflation has been again continuously rising. You can see the food inflation was 9.7% last month. It has come down to 8.9% this month. The shelter cost 6.1% last month. Now it is 5.4%. Still quite high. And if you look at the transportation cost, it was 3.1%. Now it is 0.3%. So transportation has been a major factor declining the CPI reading overall, but the food and shelter is the outlier that we have to see coming down. And what we can see here that a lot of economists are also pretty much talking about the same thing here, and we're seeing that the headline has eased, from 5.2, but it is being offset by the higher mortgage interest cost, because the shelter cost is actually also being driven because of the higher interest cost, because as the interest cost is higher, the mortgage payments are higher, and this is contributing into this shelter outlier. Now, if you look at the month-over-month CPI readings, and this is basically a monthly CPI reading comparison, and if you can see that the 2022 has been a significant outlier from the monthly perspective. You can see there was sharp rise of CPI readings in month-over-month basis at the beginning of 2022, but by the mid 2022 we saw a significant decline, which means as we pass this period this year, which means as we go into June, July of 2023, we can see the overall CPI will be coming down to 3% or maybe sub 3%, because this is the base year effect that everybody's talking about, because the early part of 2022 was quite high, and when we do an year-over-year comparison, of course it will come up higher. But as we pass that stage, and if this trend continues, like the overall monthly CPI is hovering around between 0.0 and 0.5%, this may trending towards a CPI overall coming down to 3 or sub 3%. One thing I'm going to say here is I think we have to give credit to Bank of Canada here, because as they announced the rate hike pause 2 months ago, at that time a lot of economists were criticizing Bank of Canada, saying, hey, this was a premature decision because on the other side of the border, Federal Reserve is still hiking rates. And as they continue hiking rates, the difference between the Canadian interest rate versus the Federal Reserve interest rate was quite wide. And this would eventually put a lot of pressure on the Canadian dollar, which was the case. But as we are seeing the inflation is quickly coming down, maybe that rate hike decision was a good decision to make. Because if they continue raising rates, things would have been much worst here in Canada as well, because what we saw in the US in terms of the banking crisis, the commercial real estate crisis that is brewing up, that could have been here as well, and further increase in interest rate will further deteriorate the situation. So I think that was a good decision in my opinion. We will have to continue observing that. And a lot of people are asking question, okay, when Bank of Canada will start cutting rates? I think until and unless we see this food and shelter cost coming down, I'm not seeing Bank of Canada is going to comfortably, cutting rates, because these are the two outliers and it can keep the overall CPI at an elevated level. Now, they can perhaps reduce the shelter cost by reducing the interest rate, but they cannot control the food rising cost, because that is completely out of control from a monetary policy perspective. So we'll have to see, we'll have to assess how things are playing out. But I think by end of this year, if things stay at that level, if there is no oil price shock in the international market, we will see CPI at least at a core level will come down to maybe 3 or maybe sub 3%. That will determine how Bank of Canada will assess their monetary policy at the beginning of 2024. They are indicating that they may be able to cut or start cutting rates at the beginning of 2024. Who knows? Time will tell. The data will drive those decisions. So my name is Yasin Nizami. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. And I will see you in my next week video. Take care.